Sorry, now you're good.
All right. My name is Alex Zolo. I'm the executive director of the Wareham Land Trust. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This meeting is to let you all know where we stand and what we're thinking for North Water Street Beach, which is a property that was gifted to us with the sole intent of public access. So, being prudent landowners, we are trying to understand the threats that face the property and work through a process of figuring out what needs to be done for the best outcome possible with sea level rise, with the kind of the wall crumbling, all of that. So this is the very beginning stage. No decisions have been made yet. This is really to just let you all know we are undertaking this. So Ryan Semple is with me tonight from the Land Trust. He is the head of our outreach committee, and I will let him give a little bit more context.
Right, so as Alex said, we're trying to maintain public access to this beach in perpetuity. That is the Wareham Land Trust mission. We have initiated this project with generous funding from the State Office of Coastal Zone Management. We're a pretty small organization. We wouldn't be able to undertake this project without them, so I wanted to thank them for that. Just a couple things to know is the name of this property is North Water Street Beach, but it actually extends along the length of North Water Street Beach and then turns and goes to Cove Street. I know there's been some confusion in the past about that. So it's the entire length of the seawall from Onset Ave to to Sandy Beach, exactly. I know many of you are neighbors and are very interested in hearing more about this project, so thank you all for coming. Again,
I put do not disturb on.
The main purpose is just to let you guys know what's been going on with this project since it started last fall, and where we'll be going in a couple months. This is the first of two meetings. The first one, this one's just to introduce the project. Later in June, possibly late May, we'll have a second one where we're talking about possible feasible alternatives to the seawall in its current state.
Are you talking about rebuilding it?
It's a good question.
That's a good question, yes. Possibly it's that would be, rebuilding the whole thing from scratch would be quite expensive, quite probably prohibitively.
No, build it,
we're trying to see.
Some little guy with a wheelbarrow built this back in the 50s. He had a little helper and he went around, my mother said he went down the whole beach, did it all in 1 year.
And that's, so again, like both Alex and Ryan had indicated, nothing's been decided yet. We're still in a very early phase, and that's part of the reason why we're engaging with all of you, is because of that type of site history that can help to inform what could potentially be done at the site down the line. So
have you taken into account the people that have deeded beach rights there?
We don't all.
When the lots were sold by the Hammond family to different people, they included beach rights in those deeds.
Well, we're certainly not going to take your rights away.
Pardon?
We're certainly not going to take your rights away.
I just wondered whether it's been considered. Because a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a number of people that own houses there, they're under the impression that they have deeded beach rights, but they don't. And there's a number of us that do, and those rights used to include that we could run boat lines out and tie our boats up from the beach, so we didn't have anything in the river, out in the middle of the river.
Yeah, so those are the kinds of things we'd like to see.
Yeah, and
You share
certainly
with us. Yeah.
helpful information, and we're in the middle of doing some of that deed research now about where the land trust parcel is currently located, what easements the town holds away from the roadway for utility right-of-way and things like that. And again, the trust mission is to maintain that access to the shoreline, and so continued and ongoing access for members of the public, neighbors, abutters, et cetera, is a key component of.
Well, that was Bob Hammond's intent. He had sold the beach on the other side of the bridge on the South Water Street side and said he regretted that decision after he did it. Because as soon as he did, they put up private beach signs.
Mhm.
And his feeling was the beach is for everybody. And I'm 79 years old. I grew up on that beach.
Mhm.
And no one ever told people to get off the beach that didn't live there. You want to use the beach? Go ahead.
Mhm.
So it's always been an open beach to the public,
Mhm.
even though it might have been owned by someone
Sure.
and now by the land trust.
Right?
You're not talking about restricting anybody's beach rights, are you? No,
No,
you're not gonna build a parking lot across the street, are you? No.
No.
So you have the same piece of land there,
There already is one. Right in front of my
and
house.
basically you wanna just build a wall there, right? A better wall, hopefully?
So
And maybe
It's-
get some sand on the beach?
So we do have almost an hour set aside for public discussion and to solicit public feedback. So again, we're at a very preliminary phase. Nothing's been decided. We don't even, I mean, we've got ideas, but there's no real direction that the project has taken. And maybe diving into kind of the components of the project will help to contextualize where we stand and where we're going.
So can I ask
No
a question
plans
about
have
the
been
first
made.
phase? Because there's really like it's stuff that's dangerous on the beach right now. The stairs, like right at the beginning of front water, there's two sets of stairs. One of them just like drops off when it's low tide because the
Mhm.
sand doesn't even come up to it. And then there's exposed pipe further, drainage pipes further down.
So addressing some of those public safety hazards is something that we've talked about both with the trust and with the town when we've met to discuss this first phase of the project. So yes, that is something that's being documented and considered. And it's something that'll be taken into consideration as the trust and the town work towards
Yeah, because the
actionable
handles are all
solutions for the site.
rusty, they're
Yeah,
like
those-
unattached,
Those
they're very
railings
dangerous.
should just be taken down.
I know.
Cause somebody's gonna get hurt on those, cause they're just like, well, you've seen them, you know what they are, right?
Yeah, so this again is all feedback that we can
Yeah.
take into consideration. I do think it would be helpful to talk a little bit about what we hope to get out of the meeting tonight. Talk a little bit about the components of the project and then we fully intend to open up the meeting and have a public discussion and listening session to hear back from you.
You say it goes down around the corner, how far down Cove does it go?
We've got some great maps for you.
All the way to Sandy Beach, to the end of the seawall.
Okay, so it goes all the way to Sandy Beach?
That's correct.
Sandy
Yep.
Beach is privately owned
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
by the Sandy Beach
I don't think it
Association.
is. They may say it is. I think it's all public.
Alright, so why don't we let them do their thing and then we'll do the next question.
thank you, I was just about to jump in.
Just like
Yeah,
South Water
so
Street is-
before
is a-
we
not a
Yeah,
private
Southwater's a
beach.
public
Yeah.
beach too. It's
Yeah.
not private.
So before we get underway, and this may take a little bit of help from IT, I believe that India Mackelson from Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management is on the Zoom call. And I was wondering if India would want to just say a few words. We'd like to acknowledge CZM's funding of this project and figured if India wanted to jump on for just a moment,
Alright, what's
we
the
would
name
allow her to
again?
jump in.
That's
India,
our India,
you're right
India
on it.
magazine.
Yep. Hi,
Everyone, do you hear me?
we can.
All right, great. Hi, I'm India Mackinson. I'm the Coast Resilience Grant Specialist with the State Office of Coastal Zone Management, and we're the funders of this project. We're also available to help with any technical assistance on coastal processes and resilience and community engagement. So really happy to be here and so glad to see so many people in the room. And I'm sure there's more on Zoom. So thank you very much. I'm excited to see what how the discussion unfolds.
All right, thank you, India.
Before I forget, this is Adam Finkel with Woods
Oh.
Hole Group. I don't think he's been introduced yet.
Yeah.
Woods Hole Group is the group doing this work on behalf of the Wareham Land Trust.
And again, my name's Adam Finkel. I'm a coastal scientist with Woods Hole Group and the project manager on this particular project. Our offices are directly across the bridge, right in Bourne. We're on Waterhouse Road across from Atlantic Subaru. So we do a lot of work locally with the local municipalities, and I can assure you that Wareham is not alone in the challenges that it's facing along the coast. So thank you, and I would just ask that IT reshare the screen, and we can advance to the second slide or the second page in the presentation, please. Perfect. All right, so this evening I'm also here with Linnea Lau. She's a coastal resiliency specialist from our office who's going to speak to a couple of components of the project. And just thinking a little bit about the agenda for tonight, we've worked through introductions. We're going to go into some detail regarding the scope of work that we're going to be completing through June of this year. So we're on the fiscal year deadline. We'll have things wrapped up or this initial phase wrapped up by June 30th. I'll likely turn it over to the town very briefly to talk about if there are, we do have town representation in the room tonight, don't we? Town of Wareham? We do have. Yeah, so we could use some help with number 3 on the list, which is just talking about a concurrent stormwater improvement project. I'm sure several of the neighbors are aware that the town is looking into improving stormwater conditions in the neighborhood during heavy rain events. And then 4 and 5 on this list is us turning some of the questions over to you. So we only intend to be presenting during the first half of the meeting. The second half of the meeting is reserved for us to hear from you as local stakeholders. And so we're going to be asking some questions about key considerations that we should take into account, things like the stairs, things like deeded access to the beach. Those are all things we do want to hear about. And then the other thing we want to hear about, and I'm putting you on the spot again, but for folks that have spent the past 7+ decades on the beach, we also really need to wrap our head around what we want the future vision for the site to look like. So we're not proposing wholesale changes, but what do we want access to look like? What do we want things like parking to look like? What are the features or the way that you're able to interact along the shore that you like most about the site that we want to make sure that we incorporate into any alternatives that we develop to improve the resilience of that shoreline? So that's your opportunity to provide us with feedback that we can then incorporate into any alternatives we develop to help improve that section of shoreline. And by improve, we know that the wall is in various states of failure and certainly needs attention, among other things. So leaving no stone unturned, nothing's been decided. This is an initial meeting just to introduce folks to the project. And we'll talk about some of the next steps that we'll be working on this spring before we adjourn. Next slide, please. So we're going to jump into the scope of work in a little bit more detail on the next series of slides. So the map over at the right-hand side of your screen shows the study area shaded in orange. So what we're looking at is the
Apologize.
that's okay. The North Water Street Beach and the Wareham Land Trust parcel that's shown in green there. Our study area really ends where the Wareham Land Trust parcel meets the edge of the roadway. And that's where the town interests begin and extend across the street to the private parcels. So we're really focused on the Wareham Land Trust parcel and the adjacent beach, though we fully recognize that there are interests in the roadway, there's utility infrastructure present, there are private parcels, there's stormwater. So we're fully cognizant of that, but just to be clear, the focus of this project is on the Wareham Land Trust parcel. The first task that we began November into December, and some folks might have seen us out on the site, was to conduct a site survey of the Wareham Land Trust parcel and to pick up and survey the coastal resource areas. So the beach versus the mudflat versus some of the dunes that extend over the top of the seawall and the adjacent salt marsh. We also, as part of the second task that's just kind of wrapping up at this point, looked at the coastal vulnerability of the site. So what are high tides going to look like at the site, not just in the present day, but in 2030 in 2050 and 2070, how's that gonna change? Are we gonna lose more and more of the beach? Those are some of the questions that we're trying to address. And then we also looked at what some of the storm cases are gonna look like. Because just to be frank, regardless of what happens with the seawall or with the Wareham Land Trust parcel, there is some level of flood exposure to the neighborhood. Water's
Oh, yeah.
gonna find a way in. And then tasks 3 and 4 are what we're gonna be working on this spring. So we're gonna develop a suite of alternatives of what could potentially be done at the site, not what should be done. I'm very careful about that in my role as a consultant. I don't like to prescribe what anyone should do. We like to present folks with options that can then be discussed and decided upon from there. And then the public education and outreach component is why we're here tonight, is to bring people up to speed on the project, hear from you, and help guide that path forward. Again, just acknowledging the diversity of interests. We've got the Wareham Land Trust. We've got town ownership of the roadway, landward of the trust parcel. We've got all the neighborhood residents, and then we've got folks from around town that utilize the beach in that location. Because nobody gets kicked off that beach, right? And so we acknowledge that it is gonna take some collaborative thinking regarding what the current usage is, what some of the shortcomings of current usage is, what the concerns of local residents are, and then talk about what type of future vision people can get behind and envision together. So just a little bit more information about the individual tasks.
Next slide.
Yep, next slide, please. So one of our first tasks was getting out onto the site to document existing conditions. So just over the past couple of weeks, we had one of our coastal engineers come out to the site to give an evaluation of the existing seawall and coastal infrastructure found on site. And the reason they would do that, we all know there are aspects of the current infrastructure that are in various states of disrepair. And it's beneficial for any future permit application to initiate a repair, or for any future grant application to help fund any repair or resilience building strategy for the shoreline, to have that documented engineering assessment of the existing condition. It's critical that we have that background research done before taking any next steps. The same is true of the resource area delineation. I'm not an engineer. I'm the plant guy. I'm the resilience planner. I'm the ecological restoration specialist in our office. And so our team went out and we documented the extent of the beach, the extent of the dune, the extent of the salt marsh, because the location and extent of those various resource areas has a bearing on what you can and can't do. Regulations come into play relative to proximity to all of those various assets. And then the site survey was the last critical component. And you can see over on the right, the extent of all the survey data that we collected. All those yellow dots are individual points all around the beach, all around the dune, along the seawall. And we caught elevations or captured elevations across all the side streets as well. So that level of data collection translates over into existing condition engineering plans that you see on the left there. And we've got, I want to say it's either 3 or 5 plan sheets that as you flip through them, work your way down North Water Street, around onto Cove, and terminate over at Sandy Beach. It's really critical that we evaluate the existing conditions and at least collect all of these initial data sets so that we can leverage them again for it's better to get that background research done now, so that we can help to advance subsequent steps down the road if the trust, if the town, others choose to take them. The next step.
slide, please.
Yep, next slide, please. And Linnea is going to talk through the vulnerability assessment component of the project.
Yeah, so Adam showed that map with all the yellow dots of survey elevation data that we collected. We're able to apply results from a flood risk model to that elevation data, and more importantly, for the site itself, we can understand how mean high water conditions that are projected for the future might interact with those elevations. So we can understand how much of the beach and the seawall might be affected at different times in the future. And we also got a really holistic idea of flood vulnerability and flood pathways in the neighborhood. So we're gonna use the results of this assessment to inform the alternatives on the next slide. Yeah, so we'll use those results to inform alternatives. And we're hoping to, improve resilience, improve habitat quality, public safety, and also water access all at the same time with whatever alternatives we come up with.
And so this is kind of a pivot point for us. So we've gone out, we've collected a lot of the initial data. We've had a look at some of the Massachusetts coast flood risk model results, which are all publicly available, and we've had a look at them in a very site-specific manner in this location. And what we're now going to be doing is pivoting once we hear back from everybody in the room. We're going to be pivoting from just collecting data to trying to figure out how those data can inform the development of alternatives that will help to improve the resilience of the shore, potentially help to mitigate erosion, potentially to improve on aging or degraded infrastructure. And all of this is within the context of the Land Trust mission to continue providing that public access to the shore in a safe and perpetual manner projected out into the future.
What we're looking at there has nothing to do with.
That's
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
So all we were saying here, when we're looking at these two additional sites, so what we intend to do and what we find is more beneficial, and I'm gonna ask IT to help me out here. Can you scroll back 2 slides, please? So what we find to be a lot more beneficial than trying to show a possible alternative on an engineering plan like this, which is tough to interpret if you're not an engineer. Forward 2 slides, please. Is the development of conceptual imagery. And this is not in Wareham. No, this is not in Wareham. This is not a cross-section that we developed for this site, but we try to develop conceptual imagery that illustrates what types of things might be possible at a given site. So the end product of this project is going to be a suite of alternatives that could potentially be selected from and advanced forward. And the reason that this imagery is included here is because we like to include conceptual plan views about what might be possible and then cross sections of what might be possible, because we feel as though it's a better representation than just putting a couple of polygons onto an engineering plan. But again, these are examples from other projects. This is not North Water Street. This is not Cove Street. Next slide, please. So like Ryan mentioned, we also are charged with a public education and outreach component to the project. So we're all sitting in the first public stakeholder meeting here tonight. This is one of 2. And our intention is that stakeholder meeting 1 provides everybody with an overview of the project. What's going on? Why are you walking all over our street? What's that survey equipment doing? What are you collecting? And what's the purpose of all of this? So that's why we're here tonight. And then the second stakeholder meeting that is likely to take place in May into June is an opportunity for us to all come back together and have a look at what might be possible at the site and get some reactions and feedback about the direction that the community feels supportive of and feels like they can be supportive of. And then one of the things that's going on behind the scenes is a meeting that took place between the trust and Woods Hole Group this morning. We're providing monthly updates to our funders, touching base about the project, tracking progress, etc. Question?
Yeah, you're gonna be put together, I'm assuming you're gonna be putting together a series of proposals, that's what sounds like you're gonna be doing. Will it be a public comment period? Okay.
Yep, so that's,
When will the public comment period be taking place?
so it's likely gonna be taking place in May
Okay,
to solicit feedback, because we need some time to wrap our head around what might be possible. And then the next meeting would be actually scrolling through some of those concepts that I alluded to.
Yep.
And getting your feedback on them.
one follow-up question,
Sure.
how big is the grant? I'm just curious.
So just for this, so
To
we're.
cover this whole thing, cause it's just not gonna be cheap.
So this initial planning grant is not a substantial budget. Well, everybody's got a different opinion. This initial scope of work is right around $80,000.
And this is just for the background work that Woods Hole Group has already performed and the design of the potential, the feasibility analysis of what might be able to be done on the property later.
Okay, so the 80,000 is just for the feasibility
This is
part.
just coming up with the options.
Right.
Okay.
There would be a long road, once an alternative is selected, if one's selected, there would be a long road through the permitting process, probably a couple of years, I'm not exaggerating there, it's dubious. And then probably a bit more time moving into construction, and at each step along the way, there would be subsequent requests for different funding sources to help support that work.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
And I'm trying to think. Our budget for this project, and I'm just making sure that I'm clear here, our budget for this project is being covered entirely by the state grant. So this is not money that's out of pocket from the town. This is not money that's out of pocket from the land trust. The trust and the town are just providing in-kind services. So support from staff hours, as a match for the grant, not dollars or cash match. All right. Next slide, please. And Mike, did you wanna
Not
jump in
really.
at all? No, not really. We just wanted to acknowledge concurrent projects.
Yeah, I'll just mention that the town hired, I don't work for the town, I work for Weston and Sampson Engineers. We were hired in order to take a look at the stormwater in North Water Street, particularly the stormwater that came out into the East River through the two pipes that went out into there because they had crumbling leaching basins that were dangerous. So our look was to look at the quality and the quantity of the stormwater during various storm events for a portion of North Water Street closest to Onset Ave. And a result of that was phase one was to remove the pipes, cut them off, put some stone in, and to remove the leaching basins that were there for public safety reasons. And then we put the project essentially on hold because this project was going along and it didn't make sense to be thinking about what to do until you figured out what to do with the wall, because they are connected.
Looks like we've got a couple of questions and then we'll transition over, sure.
Regarding what the gentleman just said, somewhere around 15 or 20 years ago, the end of Cottonwood Ave, which is right where Cove Street is, was dug up and some type of drainage was put in. There's a pipe, there's a manhole without a cover on it. Okay, it says drain, and it has been collapsed for, I think I've called for 5 years. And every year, the town comes out and puts blacktop in it, they drive away, and it sinks.
Thank you.
Is that part of,
No, the study area that we were involved with was not that far down.
okay,
That doesn't mean that it might not be as this project.
cause you had mentioned something on one of the first slides about stormwater or something, and I know this isn't a catch basin because there's no grill on it, it's just a regular cover that says drain. And there are other ones you can tell by the area, cause you can see how the blacktop was cut.
Mhm.
And, we've been there 41 years, and I get, my best guess is it was somewhere around maybe 15 or 20 years ago that they did this. And like I said, I've been calling for 5 years for the sinkhole.
You too, so.
Just wanna know if that was part of the.
Understood. So we're not explicitly looking at adapting the utilities in the roadway. But to that end, if we make any modifications to shoreline protection, seawall, et cetera, it's likely that the town, I don't wanna speak on their behalf, but it's likely that the town would also consider implications to adjacent stormwater, utility infrastructure, roadway surface, et cetera. So again, we're a ways off, but I feel like just like this project is kind of inextricably linked to the stormwater that drains through the wall and through the land trust parcel, it's also linked to the road because it's directly adjacent. But it's just a bit beyond what we're looking at as a part of this
Well,
phase.
that's why it was commenting, it made the comment about
They're
studying
connected.
North Water Street, but
Yeah.
not Cove.
With the exception of the two places he mentioned, generally, all of the drainage is just in the ground. There's no pipes taking it
That's all
anywhere.
leaching. Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why at the end of Holly Street, with so much water collecting there, it's just wiped out everything underneath, and now it just flows underneath the seawall.
And all in
So
all
if
these
it's not
coast.
piped anywhere,
Yeah.
it's just gonna keep eroding.
I hear you. And there was another
Thank you.
comment here. Sure.
My name is Sandy Slavin. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. And the town of Wareham came before us a while ago to repair that stormwater drain caps, what do you have in front of number 17 and 19? And we gave them permission to remove those nasty bricks and stuff that had fallen in. And it was just something as a temporary fix to get rid of the stormwater. We also mentioned to them there was a stormwater drain in number 5 that needed to be addressed, which is close to the bridge. So they know that 5 has to be addressed, but they did a big job in front of 17 and 19. And oh, by the way, my husband and I have done monitoring of this site since 2018 for 5 years. So I know North Water Street and what has happened and changed. And the stairs don't work, but the stairs are not land trust, they're private, but whatever. It is a project that needs to be done. And I honestly, I'm a member of community preservation, so I kept wanting to see a grant come forward to work on this, and I've been waiting for it. So I'm sure somewhere down the line, Land Trust will say, Sandy, can you get a grant going for town meeting to approve? So I'm aware of the needs especially on the corner of Cove and North Water. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking up. And if we just advance to the next slide, this is our opportunity to turn the questions over to the public. One thing that I would ask, just because it would be good to put together meeting minutes from this meeting, is if we can jot down key takeaways and notes. I'm gonna take what I can, but I may be interacting more directly, so we'll try to scribe out some of those notes. But we've heard from a bunch of different folks so far, and they've spoken to some of the stormwater concerns, roadway condition concerns. We've heard folks talk about public access, the stairs, et cetera. There are a lot of different interests at the site between the trust, the town, the neighbors who are direct abutters, and then members of the public that might use the site as a recreational location. And so if we could hear from some individuals about what the most important element in your mind is. It's not the one we're solely gonna focus on, but it would be good to hear back from folks about whether the wall is the primary concern, ongoing erosion, access to be able to get out on the beach and let kids or grandkids enjoy being out on the beach. One thing I didn't put on here that I noticed when I was out on the site was how much shellfishing occurs. I don't know if it's just commercial or recreational as well, but if folks wanna raise hands, we can kind of work our way around the room and we can hear back from folks about what some of the key considerations of the community are.
Well, I have one. Are you gonna put any sand back on the beach?
It's a great question
Well, this is
too.
what they did when they dredged a couple years ago. And I asked them put some sand back on the beach. The first thing they said, you're a private beach, you don't get sand. So they threw it over there, over on South Water Street and beyond that, that's by where the Glen Cove is too. So they lost all the sand. That's why there used to be a little beach there, not a great beach, but a little beach. But now there's no beach there, so as I said, you get high tide, it goes right against the seawall, and actually that's erosion.
And I am gonna probably loop Alex into this discussion as well. So maintaining when I say resource areas, I mean that's a state term, but it means the different regulatory resource areas. So that's beach, that's dune, that's coastal bank, that's salt marsh, et cetera. So one of the land trust's primary goals is to try to maintain and improve upon the condition of the resource areas that are found along North Water, including the beach. one of the things that we're trying to balance are the interests of the trust and also the interests of the town, because we wanna try to avoid a situation where we place sand that then mobilizes into the navigation channel.
Oh, you want
So we're thinking about it, and I know that Alex has brought up the desire of the trust to be able to improve existing conditions out there to the maximum that we can.
Right.
I think we just wanna know where that sand might end up if we put it out there. But it is something that's being considered.
They have dredged the East River and Broad Cove, in my lifetime at least, 3 times. And that sand went on the main beach and the beach just prior. There was so much sand that the town has put on the main beach that the whole walkway behind it, which used to be about 3 feet off the beach, has disappeared. And still they wanna pump sand on it. The people that I know in the neighborhood said, well, why aren't they dredging out in front of the main beach and opening that channel that goes into Sunset Cove? Oh my God, we can't do that. So we'll come back over and we'll dredge the East River and Broad Cove. And after the last time they did it, the tide, the water coming in was coming in a lot more, with a lot more speed, and we're losing more and more beach. But nobody wanted to do anything to build a beach. When I was a kid, on a normal high tide, you had 6 to 8 feet of beach extended from the seawall. Now on a normal high tide, you got what, 3 feet?
Not even that sometimes.
Okay, because I spent enough of my life on the beach, I don't go down there much anymore. But if they keep dredging out that beach, that area, the East River and Broad Cove, we're gonna be in big trouble. Now, I was just telling my friend, I said, they don't go into Muddy Cove because they can't get the dredge under Dummy Bridge. But if they could, they probably would have sucked everything out of there too. For whatever purposes they have, I don't know. But they have more sand on those 2 beaches than you can imagine. Now, there was a situation in Rhode Island where they were losing a lot of beach to erosion from the waves. So they took sandbags and ran sandbags about 100 feet out from the beach. And over the course of a number of years, the beach was built out with those sandbags. Now, when I was a kid, I had to rake that beach on North Water Street from the bridge down past Grove
That's a
and
long
dig
big
out all the seaweed that was cut, that was buried underneath. Now, when we go down and keep raking the beaches, there is no place for the sand to get captured by anything. What you have is beach erosion. Now, people say, oh, the seaweed smells. Well, so what? But if the seaweed's not there, it's not trapping sand and it's not keeping the beach, it's not building it. I haven't got much time left, so it's not gonna be my problem. And I can remember in Hurricane Carol, the water coming out over North Water Street and flooding the houses. We had water within an inch of the first floor.
And so I think to that point, we do, if we were to, and this gets at both of the points, if we were to propose beach nourishment in that location, we're really cognizant of trying to make sure that we get good longevity out of it. We don't wanna put sand down and have it get swept away really quickly, so we would need to be careful in that recommendation and make sure we have an understanding of what sediment transport looks like along the shore and what the tides might do to that material once it's placed. So that's a question that can be addressed down the line. It was a
So with that, do you know now if you would bring the wall in more towards the street and make more beach area? Do you know that now that, or you're still investigating everything to do that?
Still investigating that, but part of what we're trying to figure out and part of what we'll be discussing with the trust and then talking about with the community during the next stakeholder meeting is how much beach we expect to lose at high tide over the course of the next 30 to 50 years, because we know that sometimes during high tide we've already got water up against the seawall. So we're gonna have a sense of not only what the beach is gonna look like at high tide, which is minimal already, but what it's gonna look like at low tide. And from there, that's the utility of the vulnerability assessment is if we understand how that condition might change over time, we can understand, okay, should we leave the seawall or any type of shoreline protection in its current location? Should we retreat it? Should we add sand, et cetera? So it's a next step, but it is something that we're thinking about and considering.
So I'm Nancy Leclerc, I live on Dogwood Lane. I think part of the problem is that when Wareham Land Trust got deeded this beach, it's not the typical thing that Wareham Land Trust, I always feel like they're more hike trails, nature conservancy, so there's so many pieces to the puzzle with the town and Wareham Land Trust and and the neighbors, it's just a lot of pieces to the puzzle, so I appreciate all you guys trying to do what you can. And I actually am one of the people that rake the beach, because the very little beach that we have, it usually, when it gets covered with seaweed, it's filled with cigarettes, trash, debris, and bugs, and there's no place to use it. There's no sand if the beach doesn't get raked. So I will fess up that I am a person that will rake the beach when it's covered with a lot of seaweed.
Really shows how much people care about and use this beach, that you're all putting your personal time in to maintain it.
There was a question over here.
Yeah, I had two quick
Or
questions.
Comment, question,
I had
yep.
just two quick
Sure.
questions. So the first question is, you said the next meeting, you're gonna give us a couple of different alternatives of some ideas that you've come up with to mitigate the situation.
Mhm.
Who makes the final decision about what the solution is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not me. And that's the point that I tried to make earlier. I'm really careful about that. I don't like, I live out on the Cape, I'm on a town board, I can't stand it. I probably should just, it's late, so I can be honest with everybody, right? I can't stand it when a consultant comes into the room hot to trot on a particular alternative that they've selected as the best. I mean, we can provide a suite of alternatives and we can provide pros and cons of each, but ultimately the land trust is the owner. The town is a key stakeholder because they're a direct abutter, and we've got several abutters directly across the street. So I think it really needs to be a collaborative decision. It's not Woods Hole Group that's making the final call. If that's what you were.
So you're kicking the can down the road.
Right.
You need the funding, I
Yeah.
mean, there might be a
Which is fine.
perfect solution, but it could
Right,
be
and then-
extravagant.
That's a really great point too. The practicalities of what folks or what the town or what the trust might like to do, that's a great point. If it's not financially feasible, then all of a sudden maybe you need to look at the second or third alternative rather than your preferred. That's a great point.
The second
And the
question that I
second question,
had
yep.
was, you said this is completely state funded at this point. Is there any possibility that mid-project, I mean, is the money all coming from the state, or is it in any way backed by federal funding? With the cuts to federal programs right now, my concern is that we get a few months into this and then that money goes away.
So I wanna say, this first phase of the project ends in June. The funding sources for any future work have not yet been determined.
Okay.
So for the current scope of work, there's no federal money involved. Other funding sources for future work will be determined later.
Okay.
If they exist.
And I know I'm gonna call on the next individual, I think was over here in the corner.
Quick question. Over the years, I've heard involvement of the Army Corps of Engineers having some stakeholdership in whether they built the wall or what. Do they still have a role?
Yes.
That's a great question.
Oh, yeah, Army Corps is gonna get involved in this.
I was just making sure this was sharing. Can you
Right.
repeat your question,
So over the
please?
years, I've heard rumors or whatever that the Army Corps of Engineers had some involvement with this project. Maybe they built the wall or there's some sort of stakeholder. Is that true? Is it still true?
So we're in the middle of our permit research. There's a couple of ways the Army Corps could potentially be involved. One is the Army Corps is responsible for maintaining federal waterways throughout the country, but the East River is not one of them. So when we think about federal waterways, we're thinking about like major port and harbor infrastructure. And the nearest federal waterway that I can think of is the canal. All right, okay, so it's not that far away. The canal. They're not concerned about the East River, so because of that, the Army Corps wouldn't be maintaining that channel with a dredge. But the other times that the Army Corps has federal jurisdiction is when structures or beach nourishment or really anything that you're doing in the coastal zone extends below the high tide line. So in this case, if we were to be selecting an alternative and permitting a new shoreline stabilization, whether it's a seawall or something else, if that structure extends below the high tide line, you do have to get an Army Corps permit.
But not necessarily their involvement.
They would just need to improve the project. They likely wouldn't be the one constructing the wall.
Okay, so my concerns are just short term, right? So this is all beautiful. I love the feasibility study and all of that, right? But I wanna know like what the Wareham Land Trust plan is. Cause if this is 3 years out, right, what are we doing with the structure in the meantime? Like in terms of promoting it as a place for people to walk, which happened like last year. What was it on? What?
It was Wareham Land Trust lists all their trails and we were like #1 trail.
Is that something you guys are
So-
gonna keep?
So yes, it's one of our properties that we will tell people that they can go to. We
Even in
need
the
to
de-
understand the state of the wall, which is why we had the engineer, like
Okay.
the structural engineers telling it. I haven't actually looked at that yet.
Yeah.
But yes, the public access on our properties will continue. And we need to just better understand the safety implications.
Right.
Yes.
I have a quick question based on what Ms. Levin said. That at some point in time or somewhere in the North Water Street structure, one of the set of stairs was private. Do you know are all of the stairs private or is it just one? And how, if they are private, does it impact the project going forward?
So I think maybe what Sandy was referring to is that they were like privately placed there.
That's
So a lot of the stairs were like
Well,
built
it was right in front of our house, two
yeah.
with the.
Without permits on our property. So anybody can go over them because we're not gonna tell someone they can't access the
Do
beach.
you know how many of them exist? Is it just one or does it run because there are sets of stairs everywhere?
So we didn't put in any sets of stairs. So if that we didn't put in any.
Oh, no, I know that,
The
but
existing
So
structure.
if they're there, you can use them, but we didn't put them in.
no, that isn't what my question is. My question is, will they be part of the solution? Meaning, will those stairs be replaced?
Oh, so will access remain in those spaces?
Correct, cause in front of my house,
Yeah.
I'm at 5 Cove Street, there's a set of stairs.
Right.
They've been there for 63 years, so.
Some of them are built into the
So
wall.
that's my question is how are all those stairs gonna be impacted if they weren't in fact placed as part of the original project?
So that is a great question because we will be looking at, all of the access and like there might be plantings in some places. The exact location of the stairs might change, but that is the kind of feedback we would be looking for once we get to that suite of alternatives to understand, okay, which sets of stairs are really essential, which ones can we move or possibly change. That's the kind of feedback we definitely want.
And how will you determine whether they're legal or illegal for purposes of,
So
who determines that?
yeah, part of the research that we're doing right now that I can't really, I don't have any results to share because I've got a permitting specialist or one of our permitting specialists at the office. I just sent him all the information today. The state office that typically deals with coastal structures is the Chapter 91 office. They license coastal structures within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The response I think we're gonna hear back from Chapter 91 is there's no license for this structure because it would have predated that requirement.
Correct, right.
So in my opinion, I mean, this is a stated opinion, not fact, but I would assume that the seawall and the associated access stairs over the top of it would likely receive a retroactive license
Okay,
for the
Sure.
access and
Okay.
the wall itself.
all right. Thank you.
And I think that probably gets at your point. You wouldn't want the stairs to have been constructed illegally and then go away. I don't envision that happening.
Right, I mean, there's no way to know because
Right.
obviously,
I just don't have
sure,
the information
okay,
yet.
thank you though, Phil.
Sure.
Does the land trust own the wall or do they own from the wall to the road?
Land Trust owns from the edge of the pavement of North Water Street and Co Streets all the way to the mean high tide line, is that right?
Mean high water line, yeah.
A very old
Includes the
view.
wall.
So
So-
that's the one. That includes the wall because it comes up over.
Yeah, exactly.
Second question, yeah, or yeah.
I just a statement, I can
Sure.
remember 6 or 7 stairs on North Water, none of them safe. So for your proposal coming along, part of the project should include some fully constructed stairway so we can get rid of the unsafe stairs that exist, whether or not they're made out of concrete blocks or they're rotted steel or wood, but there was no safe walkway down to that river. Cove Street was a little bit better shape, but the one on North Water Street, I was very reluctant to go down some of them, but our project should include safe access to the beach.
One of the problems is that's gonna be a question of ADA compliance.
ADA compliance,
Yes,
right?
yes, that will be an issue.
That's gonna be a huge problem. One quick question, just follow-up question I had is, you mentioned parking, putting in parking?
I didn't mention putting it in, I
Did
don't
I hear that
think.
correctly, or something else off the, or?
Someone
Yeah.
else asked a question
Okay.
or made a comment about putting in a parking lot earlier.
I can do that.
We don't have the space on our property, because our
Absolutely
property
not.
only goes to the road to make parking, so
Okay, thank you.
that's not gonna
Thank you,
happen
I
on the property.
wasn't sure where that came from, but.
That's
Should be
the
one
parking
way
on the
though,
street
for
is a
sure.
town,
That parking
That's
street,
down.
there's no way you're gonna fit in anything in there,
Right.
except what you already have.
And I think any change, I mean, I don't envision any changes to parking, but it would be outside of the scope, cause we're just focused on the land trust parcel. It would occur if the town chose to reconfigure the road in any way.
Thank you, I appreciate this.
Very dangerous.
Yes,
One
sir.
quick question, slightly off topic, and it's more for the Wareham Land Trust.
Sure.
During the winter, this winter, it's been fairly bad, but during the summer, dog poop on the land trust property.
Ah,
Cause we are dog owners and we pick up after our dogs all the time.
yeah.
I don't know if it's possible to put up the little, dog poop holders with the bags and some
Yeah.
cans, just to get, cause during the summer when all the summer people come back and everything, it
Yeah.
gets worse. And then if you have tourists in with cars and visiting the beach and everything else, it's even worse and you're almost tiptoeing through everything.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the things that Linnea and I talked about, and Linnea comes from a landscape architecture background as well. One of the things that we've worked through with other towns, like just for instance, we're working with the town of Dennis to try to figure out, they've got crumbling infrastructure just like the seawall, but instead of backing up to the road, it backs up to the beach. And what we ended up doing with them was looking at where their rock revetment is, their shoreline protection is. We came up with a bunch of different alternatives for how they could protect the shoreline. But then we came up with a bunch of different configurations for how they might like to change or improve recreational use of the beach. And I could envision taking a similar approach here where there's a major concern about shoreline protection. What do we do? Do we rebuild the wall? Do we raise the wall? Do we put in a rock revetment? Do we retreat the wall and shift it back so we get more beach? All of those questions. But then I think there's also another question about that narrow strip of land. And it's the type of question, okay, do we want some additional benches or viewing platforms? Do we want an informational kiosk that talks a little bit about the history of the site? Do we want a trash bin, or do we want distribution of dog bags? So all of those types of things, or do we want some additional low-lying shrubs or grasses to help hold the soil together landward of the seawall, so you don't get that undermining when the wall overtops. So those are all questions that can be addressed, and I think pet waste can certainly be a part of the conversation because it impacts water quality as well. So.
And I just wanna say thank you for picking up after your dog.
Every
We'd love it
dog
if
owner
everyone
says
did
that though. Just saying, I know you do.
Bring the good ones.
Someone isn't.
Hold on, I got poop bags right in my pocket here, so I'm all set for them.
I know, I've got one in every pocket, so. Any final thoughts about key considerations or concerns? Because I do have another question that's probably a bit more positive than let's all like lay into the site with our primary concerns. Do we have anything else that folks wanna share or
I
ask?
just wanted to say, I understand this project is, you know, long in the future, but there is
Mhm.
that one set of stairs at the end of Holly Street that are really dangerous and really bad, and it's next to that storm drain that they cut supposedly. And it's just, the kids play over there, and it's just bad. If they could temporarily do something to that until they get the full scale of this, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, they'd be better off just to take it down. I know that.
Yeah, there's a gap like this
Yeah.
large
And it's-
between the
and it's just
last step.
hanging in the
Yeah.
air.
And
Yeah.
the
It's very
railing
dangerous.
hanging
But that will just
off
push
of
people to the
it
next
and-
set of stairs, which is barely much better, right? The
Well,
one that has
it's a
all the
little-
rust and the
Yeah, it's a little bit better
Yeah,
than that
exactly, yep.
one, you know, that one's just the worst
So maybe a
of it.
new set right in the middle of those two and get rid of
That
those
would
two.
work, yeah.
One question about the beach access stairs, and this is a good one for some of the neighbors. Do you feel like there's just as much access to the beach this time of year in the winter? I mean, we've had a mild winter and it's been nice weather the past week, but do you think that the stairs get as much use in the winter as they do in the summer?
Not
Or
as
is it a
much,
little
but there's
less?
still people going down there,
Okay.
at least in front of our house.
Right. The only reason I'm asking is because I'm thinking about like if certain steps would take much longer to implement, like raising funds for a larger infrastructure project, there may be interim steps that we could talk about where the dangerous concrete stairs come out and then I'd say temporary, but timber stairs go in that could potentially be removed if a big storm is coming through or may come out seasonally and then you just step down off the seawall closer to Onset Ave over the winter. I'm just
Holly Street is just
Yeah.
it goes really deep there, I think, cause
Yeah,
of the
because
storm
of that
drain.
storm drain.
Okay.
So
It's undermining
it's
everything
the only
over
one
there
that's
is what's
really
happening.
super dangerous.
I just wonder if there's an interim solution to improve public safety, get the dangerous stairs out and get at least a temporary
Yeah, just build
solution in
some-
until something
Yeah,
else
just
occurs.
build some, that's what they did on, right in front of our house.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
they're not illegal, well, they might be
Maybe
illegal, I
consult a
don't know.
mason.
But there were
to see if
stairs
they could do
there,
repair.
they
We'd
were
have to
just
talk to the
concrete.
boss of
just
the
the
Conservation
parts
Commission
that
first.
on the
To be
bottom.
permitted, they were.
Okay.
What about yellow tape for now?
I know, it's from that
Caution
storm drain.
to let people know not to walk on them.
Or even, yeah, signage, yeah.
But it's so windy there, that could easily like blow away,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you could,
Do they last?
So, yeah, all of those are things that both Ryan and Alex can consider. We've got decision makers from the trust who are here, so that's a point well taken. Could we transition over to the next slide, please? So the next slide is trying to shift the conversation a little bit because I feel like we've had a look at the site, we've kind of picked away at some of the things that we're concerned about, but we also want to get a better understanding of how the site is used, how it might have been used historically, what some of your favorite aspects of being able to get down on the beach are. Is it shellfishing, just general recreation? Is it walking? Which would suggest that we need access to maintain access at both ends. And then talking a little bit about the future vision or legacy that we want for the site. So with any type of project that would look to improve the condition of the shore, we'd probably want to be designing that for 30 or 50 years. So it's not just how do we want to interact with the site tomorrow, but how do we want our kids or grandkids to be able to interact with it down the line. And so if folks have any feedback about the things they really like about the site, or the beach, or things they liked in the past that are no longer accessible to them at that beach, all those things would be helpful to hear about.
Even like the view, if you're the one pruning, just let us know the view is really important to you.
I
Yeah.
like the salt marsh aspect of it. I like that there's space for wildlife, the ducks and the birds and everything to have their nests and be protected. Last year, I saw some people cut down some of the salt marshes to clear the view in front of their house. And that, I think that really detracted from the nature view of the area.
And I'm just gonna add a point, every year we monitor the site, there was more and more vista pruning and vista pruning and putting up benches that on land trust property, putting up a birdhouse on land trust property every year. But my biggest peeve was you want a view from your porch, so you cut down all of the shrub. So
Did you see
please.
that? Oh, that's my pet peeve too.
So please, every year I report a new section that has been cleared cut for vista pruning. And that's one of my pet peeves, is conservation. What you've done to Onset Bluff, I don't want to see here.
And I think there's a component of that. I mentioned that I do have a background in restoration and plantings and things like that. If we've got a bank that's really heavily eroded, not all of our banks have the luxury of a seawall or coastal protection, and not that that's the most appropriate solution in every case, but where it's not, or if the parcel is not entitled to it, the first thing that I'm prescribing for that owner is revegetating that bank. And so native vegetation does a really great job of holding on to soils. So if you think about the corner of Cove and North Water where it's inundated, or where it's been inundated, and you've got the slumping behind the seawall, if let's say that area were to be restored, vegetation would be a key component of holding that corner together. And so I think I'm very cognizant of the importance of the vista and people's views. There are certainly different types of vegetation that are like shin to knee high that could be prescribed that you could still look right over the top of, but they do a really great job of holding the soils together. And so, again, it's a ways down the line as we work through the alternatives. Maybe it makes sense to have some clusters of vegetation, native vegetation, to help hold things together if and when that wall overtops.
We had one property on Cove Street that cleared the whole banking. Cut down all their trees and cleared every piece of vegetation on that banking. It was sad to see.
Clusters are one thing, but if it becomes full-on shrubbery and tall grasses, there goes your access. I mean, there's ticks and everything else you have to then worry about. You're not gonna walk that way. You're just, there's no point in having stairs if it's covered in vegetation. So if it really is gonna still be a recreational area, it would have to have a balance of both. I understand that the value of preventing erosion with vegetation for sure, but wilderness, no.
No shrubs. We'll just plant the grass.
It'd be nice to have vegetation that's indigenous to the area instead of knotweeds, but.
Right, but I don't wanna
mean,
walk by and be
yeah.
covered in ticks either.
And so, yeah, I hear you loud and clear, being able to balance both the recreational interest and the restoration or
Like we
or
have-
resilience
Yeah,
interest.
like we only have a few trees and
Mhm.
they're trying to cut them down.
Shade's nice in the summer, I hear you.
They're pretty,
Yes.
they're pretty, you know?
Since we're, the Sandy Beach, actual beach property,
Mhm.
so that doesn't fall into the Wareham Land Trust?
So the parcel line comes across at an awkward angle across the property. So I believe the Wareham Land Trust parcel extends to where the terminus of the seawall is. And then the angle goes kind of back at an awkward angle away from there onto the private ownership.
Okay, but it does go to the
There's a
seawall.
jagged angle in there, yeah.
Coming back towards
So-
North Water or going?
Cove Street on where Sandy Beach is, or are you just speaking about the beach in general?
Well, the beach in general, but also like, I guess because it was kind of piggybacking on what was just said about people cutting back stuff in front of their house, and also people, honestly, I've seen people pulling up beach grass to make more beach access there, and that's illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I guess my question is, for you in your role, what do we do? Is there like, is there something that can be reported? Is there something, because it's not just one spot. It's, you know, I want a bigger beach. So I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna rip up some grass so that there's more things because there's new benches there. You know, it's people taking their own initiative to do things that are illegal or inappropriate for wildlife, for the beach, for that type of thing. What would your suggestion be?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that we've heard from a couple of folks about liberties that have been taken on the Wareham Land Trust parcel, and when it comes down to it, it's a parcel, well, Sandy Beach is a little bit different than that, but along the North Water Street and Cove Street corridor, it's Wareham Land Trust's land. There are actions being taken on a private parcel that's owned by the land trust. So part of it is just, I think, having respect for the fact that the land trust is the owner of that parcel. I think another component of it is some of the public education. Why does vegetation matter? And even if it's not a blanket approach across the entire site, why having those clusters of vegetation or native plants are important? Because ultimately it benefits everyone who owns anything landward of it. And then the final component, I think I may call on the representative from the Conservation Commission to talk a little bit about the monitoring that you do and at times the enforcement that you have to, the enforcement orders that have to be issued.
The monitoring that I did was as a Wareham Land Trust monitor.
Okay,
So I only
understood,
did
yeah.
it from 2018 to 2022, was it 4 or 5 years?
Mhm.
So I have history of what has happened there.
Sure.
But conservation, unless somebody calls saying there is a major violation going along in the wetland, even if it's private land, conservation can look in at it.
Mhm.
But I tell you what, we don't have the strength to stop people from cutting the trees because they do it on weekends and at night when there's nobody willing to call about a chainsaw working. We've seen what happened on the Onset Bluff. It's brutal. You know, so every time, oh, they wanted a vista, 6 trees gone.
So,
I would
yeah.
say too, like, if you feel safe, just make them uncomfortable. Like, if you're in a safe position to do it, make the individual doing that feel super uncomfortable. Or like, I don't know.
I don't feel safe.
Right, and it might not always be safe, but
The man of weapons is
you
not a good
can
idea.
build people out of doing this.
If we have pictures of a violation of somebody doing it, we can take action.
Right.
But everything is done at night or weekends and we only see the damage. So every bench along Onset Ave now has a pure view of the Wickets Island because everything's been cut down.
And so I think getting to your question, I think it's a combination of just everybody trying to get behind a respect for the fact that Wareham Land Trust is the property owner. I think it's some of it is just educating folks who might not know that the vegetation is really kind of integral to helping to hold the bank together. We can't just rely on concrete. We've also got to rely on natural systems as well. I think part of it may be if there is a gross violation, making either conservation or Wareham Land Trust aware of it so that it's not something that gets addressed seasonally or after the winter season or months removed from when it occurred. I think that timely reporting probably would help to address the issue. And then talking to neighbors about striking a balance as well. So.
I have one more. Mostly to the Wareham Land Trust. It's a beautiful spot. It's breathtakingly gorgeous and we all, the neighbors and all the people that live here love it. But because the parking up in uptown and on North Water Street, it's all free parking. A lot of people that can't get into the public beach, it becomes a free for all basically. And it can, people that don't care about it as much as the rest of us do. And it's just the sad, it's just the sad fact of the matter. So it's a hard thing to overcome the overuse and the abuse of it. So, just so that you guys are aware that we're trying to do the best to be, you know, good monitors of it and love it and care for it, but it's not easy to do.
I just, on that note too, I'm sorry if I'm being too chatty, but I just have another concern is that with the parking and the overflow and stuff going down North Water Street, a lot of the signs that say no parking this side of the street are gone, and people over the years have pushed back rocks. So there's tons of parking on Wareham Land Trust land that shouldn't be there.
So you're saying people are parking off the road on?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the
I mean-
same, it's the same people that,
Right, but they take, signs have been knocked down so that people can park, and like I said, boulders that were there have progressively been pushed back so that people can park on that.
It's very
side.
dangerous
Besides the
in
fact
the
that it's
summer.
dangerous, right,
It is.
but
it's awful, yeah.
In the summer, it's, and like Cheryl lives
You couldn't get an
there.
emergency vehicle through.
right, no.
No, it needs to be a one-way street, first of all.
We've had,
Well, it is a one-way street, just depends where you are.
Yeah. I shouldn't talk, I go down the wrong way all the time anyway.
I think there's one
Yeah.
ahead of you in the back.
I just wanted to make a design note where if that is a one-way and people aren't supposed to be parking there, adding a curb into the design elements could accomplish that, aside from signage. But just adding a granite curb, people won't
On the land trust side,
on
just
on the
just to
ocean
keep people
side,
from
on the
hopping
East
up
River
and
side,
over.
correct.
Yep.
As well as I was curious if the land trust had resources to actually service any kind of receptacles to handle trash. The nice
That
woman
gets
over here
back to
said
the-
that, well, that's what you were
yeah.
talking about, and I understand that the byproduct of people using our resources is typically trash. But there's also not a place, a receptacle to put that trash. So, you know, the two options would be the town DPW
Yeah.
naturally, but
We don't want
does the
trash to
land
get
trust have the resources from your department to actually empty those
So what I'll say about like managing land and putting in trash cans, you put them in and it becomes a place where people
Just
show
dump.
up and
And
like
dump
empty
things
out their
out.
car.
Yeah.
They
Natural
don't
way.
respect it, they pile them over.
Exactly.
It's
Mhm.
easier to not
Carry in,
have
carry
it
out.
and have a carry in, carry out thing than to even try to stay on
Yeah.
top of it.
No
Do you
way.
have them in your other trails though?
Well, no.
No, you don't?
No.
The people in the neighborhoods decided to put rocks along that area because nobody cared about what was happening to that beach for years. And I mean, we're talking 50, 60 years, nobody cared. So people in the neighborhoods took it on themselves that they're gonna do these things. Now, those stairs that are at the end of Grove Street and North Water, those stairs were there when they built that seawall. Someone took it upon themselves to try and put a railing in, and they did. Because nobody was doing anything. The town doesn't own it, it's private property, so on and so forth. And a lot of people in the neighborhood didn't know who owned the property,
Right.
and it was Bob Hammond. So they went and did all of these things, and no one said anything. That big mound that is right by the telephone pole, that's where people dumped everything, seaweed, all the rest of it. Years ago, you raked it, and Dave Lumiansky, who owned a house there, he was the last guy that bought sand and put it on the beach when it was eroding. He would pay for the removal of the seaweed once it was put up on the seawall. It's gone. But that wasn't done by Bob Hammond, that was done by Dave Lumiansky, came from New Bedford, had a lot of money. And all the people in the neighborhood, you look around and you say, oh, they put rocks over here in front of there, I'm putting rocks in front of mine. I've seen more than one car that had to pull over to the side there and rip the muffler out of the car because they went over the rocks. So that wasn't something the land trust did, it wasn't something that Bob Hammond did. It was just people deciding they're gonna do this. Cutting down brush and planting trees along there because they wanted to beautify it. That was all done with nobody's permission, but I'm gonna do it.
It's all good information. Before we jump over here, there was a question, and I zoomed in over here. There was on one of the plans, there was a question about the extent of the Wareham Land Trust parcel and how it extended out onto Sandy Beach. So the Wareham Land Trust parcel comes over to the, oh boy, which way are we looking here? North, south, east, west?
The end of the seawall?
North, south, over to the south side of Dogwood Lane. If you have a line running down the edge of pavement, Dogwood Lane, that's the end of the land trust parcel and it lines right up with the end of the seawall. Then there is a town right-of-way, the width of Dogwood Ave, that runs straight down onto the beach.
Okay.
And then everything to the north of that is a separate parcel.
So there is supposed to be a town access.
I think it's a town landing. I don't have the parcel ownership data on this plan. I'm just looking at the lines, but it is something that could be worth looking into.
It was surveyed 2023.
That makes sense.
My understanding that there's not a right of way anymore.
That it's all one continuous parcel now, that
One
may be
half
true.
and half.
That may be true. Alright,
Anyways.
so back,
Just
Sure.
one thing to throw out, one thing that may be easy to do about the parking is to make it all permit parking for the area, like the town has done in other areas. I mean, everybody gets a, you know, a
No
permit
way.
for their cars and then they get a guest permit.
It's an option.
That is all town jurisdiction, but that's
Right.
stuff that we can suggest and take into
Right.
account when we're developing alternatives.
sure,
Probably not gonna impact your, whatever you're gonna do.
well, it might.
There are
Never
at
know.
least 3 fire hydrants on that land.
Mhm.
One right near the bridge, one down near the corner of Cove, and one partially down by the Cove. They've been there since 1900.
Mhm.
They're on land trust land now, so.
Yep, and so what's in, there's the roadway, and then I would suspect that the town's right-of-way onto the Wareham Land Trust parcel extends almost over to the utility poles and probably includes within that right-of-way those hydrants. But that would have to be taken into consideration, especially if any improvements to the road for things like stormwater or utilities, et cetera, were made in conjunction with anything the trust decided to do, so that's a point well taken too. Any comment? Yeah, go ahead.
One of your first diagrams, you showed the land trust property in green, and then you had the study area in yellow that was sort of wider and longer. And it looked, if I'm recalling it correctly, it looked like it actually, the study covered over Sandy Beach. And I'm just wondering, is there a plan that you need to coordinate? Is there a likelihood that you're gonna need to coordinate when this thing ever gets like physically moving as to what the implications of this project are to that beach?
Yeah, so members of the association were made aware of this meeting. I know Ryan's been in touch with them, and we showed our study area extending over it because we needed to account for where that seawall ended. So even though the study area extended over the sandy beach, it doesn't necessarily indicate that any improvements would be made over on that side. We just needed to make sure we overlapped the end of that structure. I do have a question just with the couple of minutes we have left. We'll try to wrap up right at 7:30 to get folks on their way. But any comments about usage? Do folks like to sit on the benches or on the beach and have a drink in the evening or watch the sunset, or are people primarily walking the beach? Is it a shellfishing spot? What are the usages that?
Yeah. Oh, swimming, yes.
And swimming off the Cove Street side or off the North Water side?
Regular beaches too. Swimming, floating.
Right, but yeah, people being able to kayak,
Sitting on
I
the spot on the
mean,
beach any day or
kayaking, I still kayak, I
trying to.
Yeah.
take out my paddleboard, I mean, those things people are doing.
So that's a great point over here I just wanna bring up. So when we're thinking about access, I've heard loud and clear that safe foot traffic access is really important. I wonder about the ADA component and if we could incorporate that in as well, so I've got that down on the list. The point though about kayak access, is it sufficient or has it been sufficient to carry well, I know the stairs are an issue. Let's ignore the condition of the stairs for a minute.
We just bring it over the wall.
You
and
just
then
bring the
drop it in.
kayak or paddleboard over the wall and that's sufficient?
Hobble down the stairs.
Okay.
And it's heavy duty
And
kayak.
you're not gonna find,
Okay.
you're not gonna find people that have those kind of challenges on an SUP, they're just not, you
Yeah.
know,
Got
for
it.
obvious reasons.
Right.
Kayaks, okay, but.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention on Cove Street, unfortunately, once they dredged, all the beach was lost.
Mm.
Right.
So people do use the beach, but unfortunately, it used to be a big neighborhood beach where at any given time in the summer, you'd see, oh my God, a couple of dozen people down there.
Mhm.
But that's gone. They still use it for swimming. They use it for kayaking. They certainly, walk and enjoy the property.
There's a lot of shellfishing down there.
Oh, yeah, they do
On which
shellfish
side?
down there,
Down
on Cove Street,
On
when you
Cove?
go
when
around
you
the
turn the
Where
corner.
it gets a little muddier?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw some of the commercial guys out there when we were,
Well, people do it legally and illegally, but.
got it.
Unfortunately, because it's become muddy because the beach has been lost.
Right.
Used to be a beautiful beach.
Talk to me about like summer evenings. Are people sitting on the wall, benches, competition for benches?
Depends on the tide.
I know they sit on the bench. Young kids sit on the wall, but
Mhm.
most adults like the benches.
Okay, and so maintaining
The wall and the beach.
Yeah.
wall,
Yeah.
wall, beach, the benches are probably good from an ADA perspective as well. So I'm just thinking about like in that upland area, landward of the wall, like at least would folks say that at least making an effort to maintain the number of seats that are available or number of benches that are out there now, is that reasonable
I
or?
find it's just a collection of cigarette butts,
Okay,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Who's smoking?
It is.
Debbie Donna.
And that's what I end up doing. I go out in the morning and I pick up I don't smoke, and I pick up cigarette butts.
That's why we no benches in front of our house.
I'm trying to think what else.
So I think Adam asked a good question. How many people think there are just not enough benches? Anyone?
No, I think if anything,
There's
too many.
none on the bridge all the way till you get down. One way there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So maybe just.
So right around, kind of maintaining what's there now, but not dramatically expanding on it.
I was close to they want them down there.
No, I.
Okay, so I'm just making sure. Got a couple of
The
minutes.
seawall is feasible.
I got a question.
Yeah, so Ryan's got a question to pose to the group as well.
Alright, well, I just wanna thank you guys all again for coming here. It's really useful for us to hear the feedback from all the people who visit the property a lot and enjoy the property and live by it. So in addition to being one of the directors of the Wareham Land Trust, I'm also the outreach chair. And so I just want to ask a few quick questions about how people heard about this meeting. If you could just get a show of hands, how many people found out through Wareham Week? How many people found out through our social media?
With email? I got email.
So how many people found out through a Wareham Land Trust email?
Someone sent it to me.
Okay. How many people found out through a flyer that was put up somewhere? Anyone? And then how many people just heard about it through word of mouth? Alright, that's
been our
useful.
beach forever.
Thank you.
And I think just one final prompt and then we'll get on our way. So we've talked about a lot of what we're considering relative to the wall. We've talked about a lot of our concerns. We've talked about your usage. Is there anything that we didn't cover relative to the way that people want to use the site that you haven't been able to, or is there a key feature that people feel like should be there? I know we've talked about trash, I know we talked about a dog bag dispenser, but are there any features that we feel like, or the public feels like should be there that aren't there, that may be a low-hanging fruit that we could work through with the trust? I guess I would just leave that there for a moment. Yes? cutting down on parking as well if you've got a bike rack. Yeah, no, it's a good point.
At each end.
Yeah.
This would be directed more to the town and probably you people. The signage in that whole area, stop signs, one way, no parking, is, we had to call, how long, Jan, did we call to try to get a stop sign replaced? Finally, a neighbor made one and put it up, and I happened to be there that day when the town came by and he wanted to know who did it. And I said, well, at least somebody did it. But the signage is horrible, all of them, stop signs, one way, no parking. Some of them are gone, some of them you can't even read. I mean, that's probably more for the town than.
Some were stolen last year.
And some of them are covered.
Yeah.
You know, some of the do not enter signs are covered. Personally, I'm always cutting that open because people go the wrong way. And they're little tiny streets, and on a one-way street, because there's no signage,
Police go the
bad.
wrong way on them also. Because it's one way in front of my house, and they drive up the wrong way constantly.
I know, it's scary. It
If
really
they're gonna
is
do it,
scary.
what are you gonna do, a normal citizen, you know?
And I
They
will
look,
just.
they don't see and they go the wrong way.
Right, I will just comment that
I
in
know.
the summer months particularly, this whole area, and I think everyone would agree, is a walking area. Everybody walks. You know, most people don't, a lot of people don't drive, they walk everywhere. And that can be so dangerous, when traffic going in the wrong direction.
There are some people that will come from Grove Street and go up North Watch Beach.
Hey, Tom.
And just before we adjourn, we do have one additional question, comment I wanna make sure we hear.
Comment from a Wareham Land Trust perspective is that we love using that beach as an educational walk, particularly for children and families to go down there who may not have the access to that live in other parts of town, so they're not as familiar with what the shellfish are, what the properties of the saltwater are. And to use that as educational opportunities is the main way that the land trust uses the property. So to keep that in mind as well. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great point to wrap things up. So I've got my email up here. You're welcome to reach out to me directly if you've got additional comments. Most of you know how to get in touch with the Land Trust as well. So if anything comes to mind after the meeting, please feel free to drop me a line. I'm right across the bridge. Ryan and Alex will hear from me. And this was better turnout than we could have hoped for, so thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I didn't know you were coming out. I never said that, but I never knew.
Plan to
We can put the PowerPoint on the website.
PowerPoint on the website.
It'll be on our website, yeah.